said, if we get through the questions, we'll have time for people follow-up questions. Our internet's a little slow.
And live.
So for those of you joining us online, this is the PEA Victory PAC, a PAC that is made up just for members of PEA and members of PEA retired. And we are doing our District 3 school board candidate interviews tonight. And the next one we have up is Ms. Kate Wallace. And so we will get started. And my first question is there a particular issue that motivates you to serve on the Polk County School Board?
Absolutely. I would like every Polk County kid to have access to the kind of education and quality of education that I had access to growing up here in Bartow, which was an interesting journey where I started off at Floral Avenue in the early 90s, and then our district completely rezoned because of a federal lawsuit that had alleged we were too segregated. And so my neighborhood in South Bartow was rezoned to Gibbon Street, which was a historically Black elementary school, had a lot of issues, had been under-resourced. And my parents and some others were ones that chose to support the district and the neighborhood public school. And so, but as a 7-year-old, when I moved over to Gibbon Street, I saw an immediate difference in what was there versus what I had at Floral Avenue. We had a full computer lab in 1991, and Gibbon Street didn't even have any computers. So that made an impression on me. I got exposed to a lot of other kids from different walks of life. And then that just grew into ultimately going to the International Baccalaureate program at Bartow, where it was a ringer. But I realized when I got to college that it gave me all the preparation I needed for college to be a smooth transition. I remember at 18 thinking, gosh, like, I thought IB was overkill until I got to college. What are all the kids that didn't have IB doing when they get to college? And so that stayed with me. And now once I got into my career and noticed just a lot of challenges, deficiencies, culture, society, things that weren't pressing state government 30 years ago that are now, which are affecting our ability on what we spend. I just thought I can't accept this. I think access to a quality education, regardless of your zip code or background, is the linchpin to the American dream. And so that's where I became passionate about these. And I will be, regardless of whether or not I'm an elected official or whether or not I'm paid to advance that mission.
Miranda?
Okay. What do you see are the major issues facing the school district and public education?
Great question. There are so many, it's really hard to sum them up. But I think if I had to pick one, I would say that we are a museum of 20th century artifacts in terms of how we're structured, how a lot of thinking pervades in our system that invisibly we don't even realize holds us back from reaching our full potential. So we still are dealing with the consequences of decisions of the 20th century. First and foremost, speaking of segregation, is Jim Crow picked out where all of our ancestors could live, mostly by race. Then we built school systems assigned around that segregation. And now we understand that that's wrong and we want everybody to have equal access. But if you have a system that's built around assigning kids first and foremost by the address that their parents can or cannot afford, we, without all the other choice programs we have, are saying that we're going to give access to our best public schools to the highest bidders, because we all know a house in South Lakeland, if you picked it up and put it on the other side of 98 off Cumbie Road, or if you picked it up or put it in Fort Meade or South Bartow, it would not go for the same price. And a lot of that has to do with where a home is zoned. So I ultimately think that that's just one example. But I also think that I thought about being a teacher when I was young, and it dawned on me, man, like if I come in and I'm really good at teaching and there's somebody who's been there for 30 years and they're not so good, the only way I could ever earn as much as them is to wait 30 years. And I just think that's antiquated. I think that that doesn't, I mean, certainly we want to pay our great teachers who stick around much more than our new teachers. But we need to have a completely different way of thinking, or we are going to continue to see an erosion in the profession, and it concerns me.
Have you spent any time in our Polk County school system, as in going into the classroom as an adult, seeing what's going on, talking to teachers, being in the classroom for more than just a 20-minute visit?
Absolutely. So I'll work backwards to most recently and then prior years. So when I became appointed to the school board and sworn in last November, I knew that I only had a year and really about 6 months because I wanted to visit all 23 schools and programs in District 3, which is Bartow, Mulberry, Juanita, Alturas, and South Lakeland schools. I also have a full-time job that involves traveling to multiple counties. So, and I still have just the actual board service, right, of, meeting, going to the 3 or 4 meetings a month we have, in addition to trying to get acclimated. So at this rate, as of today, I have been to 19 of the 23. And that's consisted of either hour-long sit-downs with principals or a combination of meeting with them and touring the schools for about 30 to 40 minutes. And then I volunteered at a couple of our schools. So far, last week I went to Spessard Holland and I volunteered for about 3 hours at their fun run for the older grades and got to visit with a lot of teachers at length. I talked to both of the PE teachers at length because they had specific challenges. So I try to hone in and focus on whoever is available because I don't want to distract from the mission. But we were in a position to visit more at length. My older brother has also been with the district for close to 15 years now. He was at Bartow High School and now he's at Bartow Middle. And he's a teacher and a coach. So I've always got, and then just having been born and raised here in Bartow, I get to talk to a lot of my contemporaries who are now teachers and administrators and non-instructional employees. So I have a good sense of good Rolodex of all kinds of people. And then some of my own former teachers, I graduated in 2003, but some of them are still teaching and working in the system and we keep in touch. Prior to Polk County or being appointed to the school board, I've been very engaged in the community, both with my capacity as Spectrum, but also prior to that when I ran a nonprofit called Lakeland Leads. So I moved back to Polk County for the first time as an adult in 2019 and started an education foundation called Lakeland Leads. And I joined the Junior League of Greater Lakeland. I had been a member of other junior leagues where I lived in Jacksonville and Tallahassee. And transferred in, that was the 3rd league I belonged to. So through the junior league, I regularly volunteered at many local public elementary schools in Lakeland and did book distributions there. That was an initiative where we would consult with the district, I believe, to say, hey, when most everything is Title I, Title I is not the giveaway. So within the framework of the Lakeland market, where can we go? So we would go and then I would spend time and talk to the teachers or administrators there just out of natural curiosity because that's been my line of work. I also mentor some teens. I have in the past, I have one now. So I kind of see through my current student's eyes. He's a senior at Bartow High School and is endeavoring to be a first-generation college student. And then lastly, this is kind of adjacent, but I think this is relevant. Is my parents who live here in Bartow took in 4 high school teens in 2020, right at the height of COVID. They're all African-American. They all grew up like in the east side of Bartow and one of Bartow's most under-resourced areas. And they were all boys who played for my brother. And we got a first row seat on like what challenges they and their families were dealing with or kind of what experiences they were having through their public education experience. And that enabled us to be very engaged. In fact, like we learned that there were students east of Highway 17 who lived just beyond 2 miles from the high school, but yet they had to cross Highway 17, at 6 in the morning, 6:30 in the morning when it was dark. And we know that people like to speed. And so back then, around 2021, we engaged the school board and asked for the district to provide 1 bus route through East Bartow so that those kids could have a safe form of transportation because we know about the incidents. So that's an example. I know that's not specifically like in the classroom, but it was a way where, my parents have been empty nesters for 25 years now, but like they were leaning on me as a community advocate to connect them. So I think Mrs. Fields at the time connected us, sat down with Rob Davis, got that done. But I just didn't show up last November all of a sudden because I work in politics. Like I've been advocating and engaging for, almost a decade now as an adult.
How can you utilize your position as a board member to address the issues our staff are facing?
Well, it comes down to budgeting and prioritization. And I think that my understanding is if you were to look at, I'm still learning and getting my feet wet, and I haven't gone through the whole, a full budget cycle of it yet. But if you were to look at how we spend and prioritize things, my understanding is now compared to, 5 or 10 years ago, as we've moved to zero-based budgeting at each school to give principals more autonomy. I can't tell you how that has or has not impacted teachers. I know that means there's more movement and then we have a lot of variety of factors. But I would say, this is a question where, and I'm going to borrow this from one of the 5 finalists that interviewed against Superintendent Hyde. His name was Dr. Jim McIntyre, and he was from Knoxville, if anybody was watching that process back in 2021. Because I was heavily engaged behind the scenes in that process and vetted all 53 people, I think, who I was on the phone researching around the country. So I'll never forget what he said. He said, you can't do everything you want in education, but you can do anything you want in education. And that has stuck with me. And now that I'm a board member, which I would have never predicted back in 2021 when I heard that, was I think what I would like to do is, it's very clear we will never be able to afford everything we want to do, but it's clear that there are a number of pain points, and there's probably 3 pain points that take up 80% of all of the time and setback in this district, right? So what I would like to do is really sit down with you all, with the broader staff at large, with the district and their and the superintendent and their staff, and say, hey, we can't do everything, but if we really threw all our marbles at these 3 things, that would really improve the quality of life for not only our teachers, but ultimately our students, because that's what this is about. That's what I would like to do. And some ideas I have are, we always hear discipline, 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 that there's kids who are out of control, they take away from instructional time. We're asking our teachers and staff to take on way too much. It's clear that whatever changes have been made are not sufficient yet. Maybe they've moved the meter in the right way, maybe they haven't. But if they haven't, which I gather they haven't, then that's something that I would like to do. Does it mean that we might have to give up something else? Sure, but I bet you could talk to any teacher and say, here are the 10 things we pay for now. Are there 2 or 3 that you would like to see less of or could handle going without if we were to get these top 3 things right? That's what I think we can realistically do and in short order. And the number one thing I think we need to do is make sure we have excellent principals in every school. If there's one thing we could do right, it would be that. Because when I talk to current and former principal or former principals, a lot of them, I know a principal that turned Lake Alfred Elementary from a D into an A, and think about the transformation that has to happen. They sustain that A. And I would ask her, how would you handle? And she said, how would you handle staffing and, culture and all that? And she said, Kate, if you get that right and make your employees feel heard, they won't leave. And that's my observation. And you get more excellent culture and excellent student performance, more parent engagement, all those things. So it's clear that we have an excellent stable of principals, not everywhere, but there are certain schools where these principals are institutions. And so I would want to know, what do we need to do to get most all of our principals there? It's kind of Pollyanna to say every single principal is going to be a rock star, but how do we move that meter? That would be the number one thing I would want to prioritize. Then making sure that we have all the resources to manage student behavior and discipline. And then I think the third thing would be continuing to drill down on our non-instructional budget areas. I referred to this in my questionnaire, but what are some cost center areas that are hampering us from directing more dollars to teachers and the classroom in terms of compensation? That has to be, I'll never say that we're paying teachers enough. There's no way we can pay our teachers enough, but we certainly need to do more, and I'm committed to moving the meter in the right direction there.
So you've answered kind of the local side, but
Yeah.
what changes should be made on the state level regarding public education, and how do you both personally and as a potential board member, sitting board member, plan to do so?
So first I'll start specific to Polk County. I think that I'm sure all of us have sensed this about Polk County, but I recently was able to come across this label and it finally clicked, is that we are America's largest district without an urban core. We're probably, I haven't confirmed this, but I talked to one of the most respected national education researchers in the country, Dr. David Figlio, who I am bringing on, by the way, at the superintendent's invitation to do some partnering research with us. His research has made the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. Randy Weingarten has hired him. He is respected across the aisle. So Dr. David Figlio. What he told me is, Kate, I'm unaware of any school district in the state of Florida or in the country that has over 100,000 kids and no urban core. So what that means is we have baked in disadvantage on how the Florida Education Finance Program treats us. Because if we had density, if we had tax base like all the other large districts do, you know, what I say is all of our large districts are on water. So they have mansions, high rises, high value property that draws down additional revenue, because by law, what the FEFP says is that when a county pays property taxes up to the state, the district has to get at least 80% of it back. Well, compared to a Palm Beach or an Orange or you know, these affluent districts that have a lot of high value property, even 80% back is still more than we're ever going to generate per pupil, because we're an ex-urban county. We have a lot of farmland, right? So I feel like while the state already does give us more than we generate, I don't think they fully appreciate the level of need we have. And I don't think that the formula fully does that. There's never going to be a perfect formula. In fact, Florida has the most equitable per pupil funding formula in the state, meaning that the distance between our poorest county and our richest county is the narrowest in the country. That's actually kind of a beautiful thing, even though we don't spend a lot per pupil. That's a product of having county-only school districts, which means rich people can't get together and create their own school system and basically make it illegal for poor people to live there, right? Like that's what we have in the Midwest and New England predominantly, and they look down their noses at us and call us racist when in fact we have a much more equitable system by comparison. That being said, going back to, that's the number one thing is I would want to impart to Tallahassee that, hey, this does a lot of things. We do get more than we get back, but you're not accounting for the fact that our students are more spread out. When we do 4 quadrants, a lot of times one of our quadrants could be the size of a district. We're not Orlando where we don't have all those major corporations and Disney and Windermere and Lake Nona and all those hospital systems and all those, you know, big universities. We're not on the water. We don't have all these wealthy retirees who pay full-blown property taxes, not homestead taxes, because they're snowbirds, right? So we could go on and on, but I think that's the number one thing. And by the way, I know for a fact that I am the most connected, well-known, well-respected person in this race who would be by far the most effective at resonating with those decision makers in Tallahassee, because I have a career where I've spent time lobbying on the very K-12 education issues. I now work for Spectrum, where we are one of the most active organizations in Tallahassee and have been on the forefront of closing the rural digital divide. And 3, because I went to the University of Florida and I did student government there. And a lot of my contemporaries when I was at University of Florida are now in state government. And I've known these people for 25 years. So I have a lot of relationships on a texting basis with people who have a lot of agency to change things. And I really do believe that I have the propensity to be an effective advocate. Short list beyond that would be, I want them to stop tinkering with the school grading formula over and over again, because we keep, right when everybody has an understanding of what the expectations are and the cut scores are, then the bar moves. The bar does need to move about every 5 to 7 years, because what happens is as schools improve, then we want to keep raising the bar, so we raise achievement, right? But the constant tinkering, it has been a lapse in leadership over the last several governors, in my view. And 3 is, I think that we need to make sure that I would say, and I don't know if this is a state or a district or a combination, but we still have massive social promotion of kids who aren't ready. And I don't mean we need to retain them and have grown kids in 3rd grade or 5th grade, but there needs to be some kind of solution where if kids are not ready to move on to the next thing, but we keep moving everybody along, that educational gap is just unacceptable. And I think there are more creative solutions we can employ where the state may need to make some exceptions And reading endorsements, I've also noticed that because of the requirements around endorsements, there ends up being a preference for unqualified substitutes over people with bachelor's degrees who don't have endorsements, and that makes no sense. So I'm sorry that was a little discombobulated.
No,
There's a lot, and I'm passionate,
There's a lot.
and I want to work with you guys.
Mike?
How does a school board balance the need to provide a quality education for all students with the need to be responsive to the local taxpayers?
Sure. So I think that first goes with transparency. And I still think there's a better way to communicate around our budget. So a lot of people don't understand, for example, that 73% of our budget goes to overhead. We want to pay teachers more, but I would never argue that 73% of our budget going to that implies that we don't prioritize pay and benefits, right? So that's obviously an information gap that a lot of people don't understand. We going back to the funding formula deficit that is unfair to Polk County, in my opinion. I think that we need to focus on correcting for that. I understand that there is a millage proposal. I don't believe it's going to pass at this time. I hope it does. I think it could if we were to get that extra funding. But I think that there's still not enough understanding around our budget. And there's a lot of people who are critical or not suspicious, but I'm trying to think of the word where you're skeptical, excuse me. So skeptical of whether and how the dollars are spent appropriately, because you hear $2.5 billion and go, how is that not enough money? So I think we have a lot of downstream problems that are going to interfere with this district and these voters wanting to spend more at this very time in history. So to me, I think what we have to do is be more transparent. We have to show results with what we have. And I think here's the bottom line is it's so great that we're a B. The analogy I use is we've become bowl eligible again, but I want a championship experience. And when we are 55 out of, or excuse me, yeah, we're 55 out of 67 districts on total student achievement when you look at how many points we earned as a district on the district grading scale. I think that there's a lot of people going, okay, like why? I'm not saying this is me. I'm just saying like the vibe I'm picking up is why would I want to tax myself more if we're already at 55 out of 67? Someone did say, well, that's all the more reason we should tax ourselves more. We clearly need to invest. But I'm just saying that the vibe that I get is that we're not showing through the results to the public that we're deserving of more investment. I just want it for more improvements. They want to see more dynamism. And so that's what we have to balance is transparency, improved results, and then we will get additional buy-in.
Well, on that note,
Yeah.
salaries were the #1 frustration mentioned on our most recent bargaining survey.
Okay.
Osceola, Orange, and Hillsborough do already have the millage referendum, and ours will be on the ballot in November.
Yeah.
And so I hear you in everything you said. So my question is will you, and if so, how will you personally, since you can't do it from your position on the board, help advocate for this needed referendum as we're hemorrhaging teachers and educational staff?
So what I will do is focus on educating as opposed to advocating. What I will say is, here are the facts. Here's our need. Here's how much we're paying into Tallahassee per capita, which I'm waiting on that data, by the way, because I wanted to understand what is a typical Polk County property taxpayer and sales taxpayer spend versus what does a typical person in Hillsborough spend before their referendum. I think having those facts, because I don't think we've disclosed enough facts, like what I would want to know before voting. And yes, because I'm a sitting board member, I have to be very careful about my public rhetoric, given the law. So I think what I'll do is just put out as much information as possible to make sure that people feel like they have all the facts they need to make an informed decision. I also feel like I'm very thankful that we're putting this in the voters' hands as opposed to just levying, because I would not do that.
Have you received any donations or endorsements from any other PAC groups? If so, which ones?
No, ma'am, because I filed about 2 weeks ago. So I am fundraising actively among friends and family and associates. But it's going well. But I will disclose that total in June during the next reporting window.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with the teachers, parents, and ESPs or this committee of Polk County Public Schools?
Is this the last question?
Other than the follow-ups, yeah, depending on time.
Oh, yeah. So I think I just want to share just a little bit about my background. Because, well, is everybody getting a copy of our
It's being live streamed. The questionnaire that you filled
Yeah.
out will be posted.
Okay.
These won't. They can live stream it.
Okay, so just for folks who are watching now who didn't get to read my questionnaire that I submitted to the panel, and thank you all for your time, by the way, because I've been in your shoes interviewing for the business community, and I know this is an arduous process. So just know that I was born and raised in Polk County. I watched my parents give and serve generously throughout Bartow and Polk County, PTO president, Bartow High School Booster Club president, getting very engaged with Gibbon Street Elementary, for example, in the mid-90s when I was rezoned. Very engaged in youth ministries, youth sports. My house was the house where all the kids came over every Friday night after football or for Wednesday night Bible study. So I did not grow up in an isolated South Bartow bubble. I grew up around all kinds of kids in a robust public education setting, the best Bartow could afford me anyway. I know that once I went off to Florida and then UF saw how much more diverse our state is compared to what you see in Polk County. But I also fell in love with politics as a kid, and mainly during the 2000 election, and 9/11 was when I was in high school. My Spanish teacher was the wife of a former state senator at the time. I was babysitting for Adam Putnam and his wife, just because I was a normal Bartow kid who happened to live 10 houses down from him and his wife, and Bartow's a small town. But having nexus to people like that was a great advantage, because as soon as I expressed interest, I was invited to go intern. So I interned in Washington on Capitol Hill. I interned at the White House at the tail end of the Bush administration. I got to meet the president and the vice president on the day of the Virginia Tech shootings. I worked for Walmart in their government relations office. So I got a front row seat in Washington as to all the different policy issues Walmart cares about. The Fortune 1 company. I got to go to Arkansas to train. And then when the Great Recession hit in 2008, I was laid off in Washington, made my way back into Florida, got into state positions, started really understanding the relationship between policy and business and education. I worked at a lobbying firm that had all kinds of clients, including education clients and government employee sectors. And then I got invited to go work for the Foundation for Excellence in Education. And that's when everything changed, and I became, what will now be the rest of my life, an advocate for education reform. My job was to do legislative affairs throughout the Southeast United States for the foundation. And that was in 2012. And the state of Mississippi was in the bottom 5 on the nation's report card. And I had the opportunity to work with their superintendent of education. That's what they call their commissioner. State senators, state House of Representative members, and the then Governor Bryant, who was also the lieutenant governor, is their current governor now, Tate Reeves, worked with all of those people and their staff. They adopted an updated version of the A through F school grading, and they adopted Florida's K-3 literacy policy with their own twists. And as if you've read in the New York Times about the Mississippi miracle, how they went from bottom 5 to number 1, and they now outperform Florida. So I come with a wealth of policy experience. I've toured school models from coast to coast in this country. I'd say that a lot of what people in Polk County think is true, if they had the opportunity to visit Jacksonville, Tampa, Orlando, Tallahassee. Everybody knows, if you follow me, that I'm a school choice person. And one of the reasons I support school choice is because you should ask Ben Crump. He is the African-American attorney who represents a lot of victims of police violence. He represented Trayvon Martin's family. He sends his child in Tallahassee to a private voucher funded school called Brownville Prep. I've toured Potter's House in Jacksonville. I've toured Icon Prep in Tampa. These were schools started by African-American pastors and African-American teachers who felt like their children were not being seen or taught by people who looked like them or understood them in public schools. Polk County doesn't really have any schools like that. So understandably, people just see, oh, well, there's a couple of great private schools and they charge a lot of tuition and those aren't accessible. So therefore, we should be opposed to them. But I've seen what is possible. A lot of what we think could never happen unless our funding was doubled, or could never happen unless certain things changed in Tallahassee, is just not true. And that's ultimately, I'm thinking, like, if these deeply, profoundly poor and violent urban cores of these big cities in Florida, like Miami, Liberty City, certain parts of Broward County, North Jacksonville, where my mother is from. She went to Ribault High School and had to change schools because there were fights at her school during integration in the early 70s. Like, I could go on, but I just think that I know what's possible, and it frustrates me to no end when I hear people say this could never happen or this is bad because, and I get where they're coming from, but I'm here to say there's a much bigger world out there, and I'm tired of Polk County being last to get these things and have these assets and rise to what I believe is our full potential.
Awesome. So we are out of time. I will say that there's one last question. I will let y'all fight to ask it, but we have literally about 1 minute.
Yes, please. Okay, how are you gonna help with teacher retentions? I've read multiple things where the district is stating that our retention numbers are great. I'm living on the front lines. It's wrong. It's a lie. The numbers are not right. So how would you help with teacher retentions?
I'll go back to what I said about really directing the superintendent that plays a laser focus on excellent principals. Every teacher I know who really loves their job loves their principal. And I think that that's the number one thing we can do that is within our means, mill passage or not. I would be lying to you if I said I'm an expert on what that looks like. And I also feel like it's weird that when we have great principals, we put them in the district office. Like, to me, the highest paying position outside of superintendent, because I see his long hours, to me, the highest paying positions in our district should be principals. Like, that should be the destination job for our most excellent teachers and our excellent leaders. And I feel like that's an example of 3 pain points, right? Like, what if our one pain point is we're going to make excellent principals be the number one thing we do? And then 2, I think retention goes around making our pay and benefit structure make sense for today's applicant and today's employee. What our 30-year plus people need and want out of their job from a benefits and pay structure is very different than what our 22 to 25-year-olds need. Yet I don't think we offer a big gap between, how we structure and standardize that. And that's where I think modernization comes in. Never meaning we pay somebody less than what they're earning now, but I would say we need to allow employees to choose their own adventures more, to say, I know I've heard Stephanie has filled me in on the past about tiered insurance plans and the terrible ways that has gone. I'm never going to vote for something crappy. My older sister is an insurance benefits VP with Insurance Office of America out of Altamont. They're the largest private brokerage in the United States. And my dad was the CEO of Pallet One, which is the largest private employer in Bartow, and they were a self-insured employer with 2,000 employees. So I have some great people to call for advice on this. But I think that I've worked for 7 different organizations, and I've never seen a situation where we offer one insurance plan without any leverage for your life situation. I've never seen the ultimate, when I got enrolled, by the way, when I got sworn in, I was automatically enrolled in the health insurance, and I had to call in and say, I don't need it. I've got health insurance from Spectrum, right? So I know that seems kind of wilty, but I'm trying to say that there's so many things we could do that kind of reflect the rest of the working world in a good way that would make more sense for the employee. I know we don't have maternity leave benefits too, which I know we have a high percentage of female population. And, you know, I would love it if everybody could plan to have their babies over the summer, but that's not how nature or God works. So, you know, I think that that is something we could lead with, as a benefit that, you know, that we don't offer. So I'm, Sarah Beth Wyatt pointed that out to me. And I thought that was a great thing we could look to. I don't know what the cost of that is or why we haven't, but I'm going to look into it and I would like to champion that. I'm 40. I haven't had children yet, but if my life goes the next 4 years how I want it to, I will be on the district's health insurance plan, and I would like to have a baby on it and have some maternity leave.
I'm so sorry that we're out of time. Because I think all of us have more questions.